Hi, welcome to Miss Richardson's U.S. History 5-minute lectures. This information is U.S. Notes 3.1, The Rise of Dictators in the 1930s. It will include information that aligns with the first section on your study guide for Unit 3. Now remember, you have control of the lecture, so pause whenever you need to, and if you have questions, write them down and bring them to class. And rewatch as often as you need, especially before tests and the final. And always make sure you're using the study guide to help you take your notes. Let's go ahead and get started. In Unit 2, you learned about what was happening in the U.S. during the 20s and the 30s. Well, many countries never got to have a roaring 20s like we did. They actually dropped into a depression following World War I, and that depression continued into the 1930s. This long period of economic turmoil and unhappiness with their government, This long period of economic turmoil led to unhappiness with their governments around the world, and that allowed various changes in politics to happen that created the stage for World War II. First, we'll take a look at Europe, and then we'll look at Asia. In Italy, Benito Mussolini, also known as Il Duce by the people, took control in 1922 with his fascist party. Fascism is a very aggressive form of nationalism, that pride in your country. It's where a nation is more important than the individual. So country is everything. Fascists actually believe that individualism makes countries weak. They also believe that a country's strength comes from building up the military and expanding power and territory. So Mussolini and his followers used the fear of communism to gain support of the working classes and to gain control of the country. He set up a dictatorship but was welcomed by the people because he created jobs, stopped strikes, and ended rioting in Italy. So at the same time in the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin took control after the death of Vladimir Lenin in 1926. While it wasn't officially a dictatorship, the government was a one-party system, the Communist Party, and it suppressed freedoms and punished all opposition severely. Lenin had taken control in 1917 with the Russian Revolution, and it became communist, not a monarchy. And now Stalin was the second leader there. One way Stalin used punishment against the opposition was by using forced labor to industrialize the country in 1927 and beyond. Political prisoners would be sent to work camps and forced to labor. Often it led to death, and ultimately Stalin is responsible for the death of somewhere between 8 and 10 million Soviet citizens. But because he was never actively taking over other countries, we really didn't pay a lot of attention to this until much later. So the final area of Europe we want to look at is Germany. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, also called the Nazi Party, developed in the 1920s as a response to the problems of the German Depression. The party was very nationalistic and anti-communist. Many Germans who were upset by the decisions made against them after World War I supported this party, who wanted to reclaim the glory of Germany and get them out of the Depression. One of those Germans who supported the Nazi Party was Adolf Hitler. He joined the party and moved up the ranks, taking part in a failed government overthrow attempt in 1923. While in prison for this attempt, he actually changed tactics. He rethought things and realized that a violent overthrow was not a way to take over the government, but rather taking over from within was the way to go. So the Nazi Party actually began winning elections after this, and by 1933 they were the majority party in Germany and had taken control of the country. So one way the Nazis gained support was by rebuilding the military. They created jobs in the military, in factories that made military supplies, and in transportation. The Nazis began pulling Germany out of the Depression, and people supported them. Now, once in power, Hitler was appointed head of the German government and used the military and police to intimidate those who opposed him and his power. By 1934, he had gained absolute power in the country. So in Asia, the rise of a powerful dictator was a little bit different than in Europe. So in Japan, there was an emperor, Hirohito, who was the religious and official head of the civilian government. So he was revered as a religious figure, but he actually lacked power. Military officers believed that the government who was elected was actually responsible for the depression in Japan, and they wanted action taken. The prime minister disagreed with them, so they actually assassinated him. The leaders, these military leaders, were following the lead of General Tojo, and they decided they needed to invade and control China in order to fix their economic problems, because that would give them their resources and their markets that they needed. So they sold this plan to the public as nationalism and expanding the empire under a military government. The public wanted out of the Depression, so they supported these actions. Soon, Japan was taking over large portions of Asia for military and economic gain. So this is the end of the U.S. Notes 3.1. I hope you learned something. Bring any questions you have to class, and I'll see you tomorrow.